In the annals of European history, few figures loom as large as Charlemagne. Known as the Father of Europe, he was a warrior, a reformer, and a visionary who sought to unite a fractured continent under the banner of Christianity and imperial authority. Rising from the ashes of the fallen Western Roman Empire, Charlemagne forged a realm that stretched from the Pyrenees to the Danube, blending Roman traditions, Germanic customs, and Christian ideals into a new political and cultural order. His reign marked the birth of the Holy Roman Empire, an institution that would shape the destiny of Europe for over a millennium. But who was Charlemagne, and how did he achieve what no ruler had accomplished since the days of ancient Rome? This is the story of a king who became an emperor, a conqueror who championed learning, and a man whose legacy continues to resonate in the modern world. From his brutal campaigns against the Saxons to his alliance with the Papacy, from his revival of classical knowledge to his ambitious administrative reforms, Charlemagne's life was a tapestry of triumph and contradiction. Before we dive into this epic tale, make sure to like and subscribe to stay updated when we release new videos on ominous history topics. Now let's explore how Charlemagne united Europe and laid the foundations for the world we know today. The fragmented post-Roman Europe, the 5th century. In the wake of the Western Roman Empire's collapse, Europe descended into chaos. By the late 5th century, the once mighty empire had fractured into a patchwork of warring kingdoms. The Visigoths ruled Spain, the Ostrogoths held Italy, and the Vandals controlled North Africa. In Gaul, the region we now call France, the Franks emerged as a dominant force. But this was no unified realm. Rival clans and warlords vied for power, and the legacy of Roman law and infrastructure crumbled. Cities shrank, trade routes disintegrated, and literacy faded. The dream of a unified Europe seemed lost to history. The vacuum left by Rome's fall created opportunities for ambitious leaders. Among the Franks, a tribal confederation along the Rhine River, a dynasty began to take shape. The Merovingians, named for their semi-legendary founder Merovech, claimed divine right through bloodline. Yet their grip on power was tenuous. Local nobles, bishops, and foreign invaders constantly challenged their authority. By the 6th century, the Merovingian kings had become figureheads, their authority eroded by infighting and incompetence. This era was marked by instability. Raiders from Scandinavia, known as Vikings in later centuries, began probing coastal settlements. Islamic armies, fresh from unifying Arabia, swept across North Africa and into Spain. Meanwhile, the Byzantine Empire in the east clung to Roman traditions, but struggled to project power westward. Europe's future hung in the balance, a chessboard of competing faiths, cultures, and armies. Amid this turmoil, the concept of Christendom began to crystallize. The Catholic Church, centered in Rome, sought to fill the spiritual void left by empire. Monasteries became bastions of learning, preserving fragments of classical knowledge. But the Church needed a secular partner, a strongman to defend its interests and spread its faith. The stage was set for a new kind of ruler, one who could wield both sword and cross. The Frankish kingdom, though fractured, held the seeds of future unity. Its fertile lands, strategic location, and martial culture made it a potential nucleus for revival. But first, it needed a leader capable of harnessing these advantages. That leader would not come from the decadent Merovingian bloodline. Instead, he would rise from the shadows of the royal court, a man known as the Mayor of the Palace. The Merovingian Dynasty, the 6th and 7th centuries. The Merovingian kings, with their long hair symbolizing sacred power, ruled the Franks for nearly 3 centuries. Yet by the 7th century, they had earned a mocking epithet, the Do-Nothing Kings. Power increasingly rested with their chief ministers, the mayors of the palace. These administrators controlled the military, finances, and diplomacy, while the kings indulged in luxury or squabbled over titles. The monarchy became a hollow shell, its authority sustained only by tradition. The rise of the mayors marked a quiet revolution. Originally stewards of royal estates, they expanded their influence by forging alliances with regional nobles. In Austrasia, the Eastern Frankish kingdom, the Pepinid family emerged as dominant mayors. Charles Martel, grandson of Pepin of Herstal, would later epitomize this shift. But in the early 7th century, the Merovingians still clung to the illusion of control. Religion played a key role in this power struggle. The church, wary of chaos, often sided with mayors who promised stability. Bishops anointed kings but whispered counsel to mayors. When Dagobert I, the last effective Merovingian king, died in 639, the throne passed to a series of child monarchs. Real power flowed to the mayors, who ruled as regents. The Franks, though nominally united, remained divided into rival sub-kingdoms, Neustria, Austrasia, and Burgundy. By the early 8th century, the Merovingians were little more than puppets. Chroniclers wrote of kings riding in ox carts while mayors rode war horses. One mayor, Charles Martel, would reshape Europe's destiny. But before his rise, the Franks faced an existential threat, not from within, but from the south. A Muslim army, having conquered Spain, now marched into Gaul. The stage was set for a clash of civilizations. At the Battle of Tours in 732, Charles Martel would prove that the mayors of the palace, not the Merovingian kings, held the fate of Europe in their hands. Charles Martel, savior of Christendom, 732. In 732, a Frankish force led by Charles Martel confronted an Umayyad army near Poitiers. The Muslims, having crossed the Pyrenees, sought to expand their caliphate into Gaul. Their cavalry, renowned for speed and discipline, outnumbered Martel's infantry. But Martel had prepared carefully, choosing rugged terrain to neutralize the enemy's mobility. For 7 days, the armies probed and skirmished until the Umayyads finally attacked. The battle was a slaughter. Frankish axemen hacked at Muslim horsemen, forming a wall of ice against their charges. Though historical accounts vary, the Umayyad commander Abdul Rahman al-Ghafiqi fell in the fighting. His army retreated, never to launch another major invasion north of the Pyrenees. Europe, for the moment, remained Christian. Charles Martel, already mayor of the palace, became a legend. Martel's victory earned him the nickname the Hammer, but his legacy extended beyond the battlefield. He reformed the Frankish military, creating a corps of heavy infantry loyal to him personally. To fund his army, he confiscated church lands, a move that drew papal ire but solidified his power. The church, despite its protests, could not deny that Martel had saved Christendom. Critics argue the Umayyad threat was exaggerated, a tale amplified by later chroniclers. Yet there's no denying the battle's psychological impact. For the Franks, it affirmed their role as defenders of the faith. For Martel, it legitimized his family's rule. When he died in 741, his sons Pepin the Short and Carloman inherited a kingdom poised for transformation. But Martel's triumphs also sowed seeds of conflict. His division of the realm between Pepin and Carloman mirrored the old Frankish practice of splitting inheritance, a tradition that would plague the Carolingians for generations. Rise of the Carolingians, Pepin the Short and the Papal Alliance. Pepin the Short, the ambitious son of Charles Martel, transformed the Frankish realm through a combination of military prowess and calculated political maneuvering. By 751, he had sidelined his brother Carloman, who chose the quiet of monastic life, and deposed the last Merovingian king, Childeric III. This bold consolidation of power marked a decisive break from tradition, setting the stage for the rise of a new dynasty. His determination to establish a legacy would soon require more than mere force. Yet, military might alone could not secure the legitimacy needed for enduring rule. Pepin faced a critical challenge. His recent coup, however effective, lacked the divine and historical sanction that had underpinned Merovingian rule for centuries. Without the approval of a higher authority, his claim might forever be seen as a usurpation. This pressing dilemma compelled him to seek validation beyond the borders of his kingdom. The answer came from an unlikely quarter: Rome. Pope Zachary, troubled by the growing Lombard threat in Italy, was in dire need of a reliable protector. The Pope recognized that aligning with a strong and energetic ruler like Pepin could provide the necessary military backing to secure the papal territories. In a mutually beneficial arrangement, the papacy extended its blessing to Pepin, effectively endorsing his right to rule. In 754, this alliance was formalized with what came to be known as the Donation of Pepin. In exchange for Frankish military support against the Lombards, Pepin granted the papacy control over strategic central Italian lands. This historic grant not only secured the Pope's favor, but also laid the foundation for what would eventually be recognized as the Papal States. The pact underscored a growing interdependence between the emerging Carolingian power and the Roman Church. Pepin's coronation further cemented his newfound legitimacy. A bishop anointed him with holy oil, invoking the divine ordination reminiscent of the biblical King David. This novel ritual shifted the basis of kingship from mere hereditary right to one imbued with sacred sanction. In doing so, Pepin not only redefined royal authority for his time, but also forged a model for the symbiotic relationship between church and crown that would influence his successors. The emergence of Charlemagne, from educated heir to formidable leader. Born between 742 and 748, most likely in the flourishing court of Aachen, Charlemagne emerged into a world where martial skill and erudition were both prized and necessary. From his earliest days, he was steeped in the traditions and expectations of a ruling dynasty. His birth heralded the promise of continuity for a family poised to reshape the political landscape of the Frankish world. Charlemagne's upbringing was rigorous and multifaceted. Under the watchful eye of his father, Pepin, he learned the arts of horsemanship and swordplay, essential skills for a warrior destined to lead armies into battle. Yet his education was not confined solely to martial endeavors. He was also schooled in Latin and the classics, an unusual privilege in an age when most nobles were trained only for combat. This blend of physical and intellectual training laid the groundwork for a future leader who could navigate both war and diplomacy. A significant influence in his early life was his mother, Bertrada of Laon. Known for her own keen political insight, Bertrada managed estates and brokered alliances, imbuing her son with a respect for the subtleties of power beyond the battlefield. Her guidance ensured that Charlemagne appreciated that strength could be as much about negotiation and alliance building as it was about martial success. In her care, he learned that the legitimacy of a ruler depended as much on wisdom and strategy as on brute force. By the time he reached his teens, Charlemagne had begun to make a name for himself on the battlefield. In 756, he played a pivotal role in quelling the rebellious spirit of Aquitaine, a region known for its stubborn resistance. This early military experience not only showcased his leadership and tactical acumen, but also forged a hardened resolve that would later serve him well in the turbulent politics of the Frankish realm. Even in these formative years, Charlemagne displayed an audacious streak. In a bold political move, he secured a marriage alliance with a Lombard princess, a decision that underscored his willingness to challenge traditional boundaries. Although this marriage was short-lived, the very act signaled that Charlemagne was prepared to leverage personal ties for strategic advantage. His early life, marked by both scholarly pursuits and decisive military action, thus set the stage for his future as a formidable leader. Fraternal rivalry, division, and the consolidation of power. The death of Pepin in 768 precipitated a critical division of his realm. The kingdom was split between his two sons, Charlemagne and his brother Carloman. Carloman inherited the prosperous eastern regions, encompassing Austrasia, Thuringia, and Alemannia, while Charlemagne was entrusted with the more turbulent western lands, including Neustria and Aquitaine. This geographical partition not only highlighted regional disparities, but also sowed the seeds of inevitable fraternal rivalry. In the immediate aftermath of the division, both brothers faced distinct challenges that tested their abilities as rulers. Carloman, governing lands rich in resources and steeped in long-standing traditions, focused on consolidating his authority with a cautious, deliberate approach. Meanwhile, Charlemagne confronted frequent rebellions in the West, a region characterized by its fierce independence and volatile loyalties. His early actions in quelling dissent underscored a determination to secure his territory through decisive, often forceful, measures. The differing circumstances of their inheritances also fostered contrasting political strategies. Charlemagne's handling of the Aquitanian revolt in 769, which he suppressed with evident military prowess, quickly established his reputation as a leader unafraid to employ force when necessary. In contrast, Carloman was more inclined to nurture external alliances and court favor with the church, seeking legitimacy through a partnership with the Papacy. These divergent paths deepened the rift between the brothers, as each pursued a vision of rulership that reflected his own strengths and priorities. Tensions were further inflamed by their respective alliances and personal decisions. Charlemagne's controversial marriage to a Lombard princess, while initially a strategic move, ultimately contributed to growing distrust between the brothers. Carloman, wary of any alliance that might tilt the balance of power away from him, preferred to solidify his position through established ties with the papal court. This divergence in foreign policy and domestic strategy increasingly undermined any prospect of unified rule, setting the stage for an inevitable confrontation. The situation reached a critical juncture with the sudden death of Carloman in 771. His untimely passing, shrouded in rumors of poisoning, provided Charlemagne with an unexpected opening. Seizing the moment, he moved swiftly to consolidate his power by asserting control over his late brother's territories. In the wake of these events, Charlemagne also realigned his alliances, distancing himself from the contentious Lombard connection. His bold military campaign in 773, which saw him crossing the Alps to counter Lombard threats, marked a decisive act of consolidation. This period of fraternal strife and strategic recalibration firmly entrenched the Carolingian power structure, all unfolding well before the year 774. Saxon Wars, a 30-year struggle, 772. The Saxon Wars began in 772 with Charlemagne's destruction of the Irminsul, a sacred pagan pillar. For the Saxons, this was an act of sacrilege. For Charlemagne, a declaration of holy war. The conflict that followed was less a series of battles than a grinding campaign of cultural annihilation. Saxon society, decentralized and tribal, resisted centralized rule. Charlemagne responded with relentless brutality. At Verdun in 782, he ordered the execution of 4,500 Saxon prisoners, a massacre meant to terrorize the region. He imposed harsh laws, converting to Christianity or death, attending mass or lose a hand. Yet Saxon resistance persisted. Their leader, Widukind, launched guerrilla raids, exploiting Frankish overextension. Charlemagne, learning from setbacks, adapted his strategy. He built fortresses along the Lippe River, garrisoned them year-round, and colonized the region with Frankish settlers. Slowly, the Saxons were worn down. The war's turning point came in 785, when Widukind submitted to baptism. Charlemagne, acting as his godfather, symbolically folded the Saxon leader into the Frankish elite. But sporadic revolts continued for another 2 decades, ending only in 804 with mass deportations of Saxon families. The Saxon Wars cemented Charlemagne's reputation as a warrior king. They also exposed the paradox of his rule, a man who revered learning yet employed terror, a Christian who preached mercy yet practiced ruthlessness. Expansion into Bavaria, 788. Bavaria, nominally a Frankish vassal, had long enjoyed autonomy under Duke Tassilo III. A cousin of Charlemagne, Tassilo ruled from Regensburg, cultivating ties with the Lombards and Avars. To Charlemagne, this was intolerable. In 787, he summoned Tassilo to a court at Worms, accusing him of treason. Tassilo, fearing execution, surrendered his duchy in exchange for his life. But Charlemagne, unsatisfied, staged a show trial the following year. Forced to renounce his claim before the Frankish nobility, Tassilo was tonsured and imprisoned in a monastery. Bavaria was absorbed into the Carolingian realm, its independence extinguished. The annexation secured Charlemagne's eastern flank. He established counties under loyal lords and integrated Bavarian troops into his army. Yet the betrayal of Tassilo haunted the Carolingians. Years later, Charlemagne's own descendants would turn on one another, repeating the cycle of ambition and familial strife. Bavaria's fall marked the zenith of Charlemagne's territorial expansion. From the Pyrenees to the Danube, his empire sprawled across Western Europe. But administration, not conquest, would now define his reign and test his vision of unity. The Spanish March, 778. Charlemagne's campaign into Spain in 778 was a bold but flawed endeavor. Responding to a plea from Muslim rebels in Zaragoza, he led an army across the Pyrenees, hoping to establish a buffer zone against Islamic expansion. However, the rebels reneged on their promise, forcing Charlemagne to retreat. The campaign's most infamous episode occurred at the Battle of Roncesvalles Pass, where a Basque ambush annihilated his rearguard. The defeat at Roncesvalles was a minor military setback, but a major cultural milestone. Among the fallen was Roland, prefect of the Breton March, whose heroism inspired the epic Song of Roland. This poem, written centuries later, transformed the skirmish into a symbol of Christian valor against overwhelming odds. For Charlemagne, however, the campaign was a sobering reminder of the limits of his power. Despite the failure at Zaragoza, Charlemagne established the Spanish March, a fortified frontier stretching from the Pyrenees to Barcelona. Governed by local counts loyal to the Franks, it served as a bulwark against Muslim incursions. Over time, the march became a melting pot of Christian, Muslim, and Jewish cultures, fostering intellectual exchange and economic growth. The Spanish March also highlighted Charlemagne's pragmatism. Unable to conquer the entire peninsula, he settled for a defensible border. This strategy allowed him to focus on consolidating his empire's core territories. Yet the memory of Roncevaux lingered, a testament to the perils of overextension. Charlemagne's Spanish venture, though inconclusive, underscored his dual role as warrior and statesman. He sought not just conquest, but stability, creating structures that would endure long after his death. Alliance with the Papacy, mutual reliance. Charlemagne's relationship with the Papacy was a cornerstone of his reign. It began with his father Pepin's alliance with Pope Stephen II and deepened under Pope Adrian I. The Franks provided military protection, while the Pope bestowed spiritual legitimacy. This symbiotic partnership reached its zenith under Pope Leo III, who faced internal opposition and external threats. In 799, Leo was attacked by Roman nobles who accused him of misconduct. Fleeing to Charlemagne's court in Paderborn, he appealed for help. Charlemagne, ever the protector of Christendom, restored Leo to power and investigated the charges. Though Leo's guilt or innocence remains debated, Charlemagne's intervention solidified their alliance. The Papacy, in turn, supported Charlemagne's imperial ambitions. By crowning him Emperor of the Romans in 800, Leo elevated the Frankish king to a status unseen in the West since the fall of Rome. This act was not merely ceremonial, it signaled a shift in the balance of power. The Pope, once reliant on Byzantine emperors, now looked to the Franks as defenders of the faith. Yet, the alliance was not without tension. Charlemagne, though devout, viewed the church as a tool of governance. He appointed bishops, convened synods, and even critiqued papal policies. Leo, for his part, sought to maintain the papacy's independence while benefiting from Frankish protection. This delicate dance between crown and church defined Charlemagne's reign. It also set a precedent for centuries of European politics, as rulers and popes vied for supremacy. Coronation as emperor, 800. On Christmas Day, in the year 800, Charlemagne knelt in St. Peter's Basilica to pray. As he rose, Pope Leo III placed a golden crown on his head and proclaimed him Emperor of the Romans. The assembled crowd erupted in acclamation, hailing Charlemagne as Augustus. This moment, orchestrated but spontaneous in appearance, marked the rebirth of the Western Roman Empire. The coronation was a masterstroke of political theater. By reviving the imperial title, Leo and Charlemagne sought to legitimize their authority. For Charlemagne, it affirmed his role as Europe's preeminent ruler. For Leo, it reinforced the papacy's claim to crown emperors. Yet the act was not without controversy. The Byzantine Empire, which viewed itself as Rome's true heir, protested the coronation. Charlemagne's new title came with responsibilities. As emperor, he was expected to uphold justice, defend Christendom, and promote unity. He embraced these duties with characteristic vigor, issuing laws, patronizing learning, and expanding his realm. Yet the title also exposed the fragility of his empire. Without a strong bureaucracy or clear succession plan, it relied heavily on his personal authority. The coronation's significance extended beyond Charlemagne's lifetime. It established the Holy Roman Empire, a political entity that would endure for a millennium. It also cemented the idea of a united Christian Europe, a vision that inspired future rulers and reformers. For Charlemagne, the coronation was both a culmination and a challenge. It affirmed his achievements, but also set a standard for his successors, one they would struggle to meet. Administrative reforms, counties and missi dominici. Charlemagne's empire was vast, but its administration was decentralized. To maintain control, he relied on a network of counts, local nobles tasked with governing counties. These officials collected taxes, raised troops, and dispensed justice. In theory, they were loyal servants of the crown. In practice, they often pursued their own interests. To curb abuses, Charlemagne introduced the Missi Dominici, royal envoys who traveled in pairs, one secular and one ecclesiastical. These inspectors audited county records, heard grievances, and ensured compliance with imperial decrees. Their presence reminded local elites that the emperor's reach extended even to remote regions. The system was innovative, but imperfect. Counts, though accountable to the Missi, often exploited their positions for personal gain. The Missi themselves, reliant on local hospitality, could be swayed by bribes or threats. Yet the reforms marked a significant step toward centralized governance. Charlemagne also standardized weights, measures, and coinage, facilitating trade and taxation. These measures, though rudimentary by modern standards, laid the groundwork for future administrative systems. The emperor's reforms reflected his vision of a unified empire. By blending local autonomy with central oversight, he sought to balance efficiency and stability. It was a delicate equilibrium, one that would be tested by his successors. Carolingian Renaissance, revival of learning. Charlemagne's reign witnessed a cultural flowering known as the Carolingian Renaissance. Though not a rebirth in the classical sense, it marked a revival of learning after centuries of decline. At its heart was the Palace School at Aachen, where scholars from across Europe gathered to study and teach. The emperor himself was a patron of education. Though not a scholar, he valued knowledge as a tool of governance. He recruited intellectuals like Alcuin of York, who reformed the curriculum and promoted the liberal arts. Under Alcuin's guidance, the Palace School became a center of intellectual exchange, attracting students from as far as Ireland and Italy. The Carolingian Renaissance extended beyond the court. Monasteries and cathedrals established scriptoria, where monks copied and preserved classical texts. These manuscripts, written in a clear script known as Caroline minuscule, became the foundation of medieval scholarship. Charlemagne's reforms also emphasized literacy among the clergy. Bishops and priests were expected to read and write, ensuring the accurate transmission of religious teachings. This focus on education had lasting implications, shaping the intellectual landscape of medieval Europe. The Carolingian Renaissance was not without limits. It primarily served the elite, and its achievements were fragile. Yet it represented a crucial step in the preservation and transmission of knowledge, bridging the ancient and medieval worlds. Manuscript preservation and Latin reform. One of the most enduring legacies of the Carolingian Renaissance was the preservation of classical texts. Charlemagne's scholars scoured monasteries for ancient manuscripts, many of which had been neglected or mistranscribed. These works, ranging from Roman law to Greek philosophy, were copied meticulously and distributed across the empire. The standardization of Latin script was a key innovation. Caroline minuscule, with its clear, uniform letters, replaced the regional scripts that had proliferated after Rome's fall. This reform facilitated communication and record-keeping, laying the groundwork for a shared European culture. Charlemagne's scholars also revised liturgical texts, ensuring consistency in religious practice. The emperor, though not a theologian, understood the importance of orthodoxy in unifying his realm. By standardizing the Mass and other rituals, he reinforced the Church's role as a pillar of imperial authority. The preservation of classical knowledge had far-reaching consequences. It inspired later movements like the 12th century Renaissance and the humanism of the 14th century. Without the Carolingian efforts, many ancient texts might have been lost forever. Charlemagne's commitment to learning reflected his belief in the power of ideas. By preserving the past, he sought to shape the future, a vision that resonated long after his death. Religious reforms, orthodoxy, and unity. Charlemagne's reign was marked by a relentless drive to standardize religious practice. He convened synods to address theological disputes, enforce canon law, and combat heresy. The adoptionist controversy in Spain and the iconoclast debate in Byzantium both drew his attention, though his interventions were not always welcomed. Charlemagne's religious reforms extended to the laity. He mandated attendance at Mass, enforced tithes, and punished moral offenses. These measures, though unpopular in some quarters, reinforced the Church's authority and the emperor's role as its protector. The emperor also promoted monastic reform. Inspired by the rule of Saint Benedict, he sought to regulate monastic life, emphasizing prayer, labor, and obedience. Monasteries became centers of piety and learning, their libraries preserving both sacred and secular texts. Yet Charlemagne's piety was not without contradictions. He waged brutal wars, sanctioned forced conversions, and exploited church resources for his own ends. His reign exemplified the tension between Christian ideals and political realities. The religious reforms of Charlemagne's era shaped medieval Christianity. They established a framework for orthodoxy and discipline that endured for centuries, influencing both the church and the state. Infrastructure projects, roads, bridges, and Aachen. Charlemagne's empire required robust infrastructure, and he invested heavily in its development. Roads and bridges were repaired or constructed, facilitating trade and military movement. These projects, though less glamorous than conquests, were vital to the empire's cohesion. The crown jewel of Charlemagne's infrastructure was the Palatine Chapel at Aachen. Designed by Otto of Metz, it combined Roman, Byzantine, and Frankish architectural elements. Its octagonal dome, inspired by Byzantine churches, symbolized the unity of heaven and earth. Aachen itself became the empire's de facto capital. Charlemagne built a palace complex that included administrative offices, living quarters, and thermal baths. The city attracted scholars, artisans, and diplomats, transforming it into a cultural hub. These projects were more than practical, they were symbolic. They proclaimed Charlemagne's vision of a unified Christian empire, rooted in Roman tradition yet distinctly Frankish. The infrastructure of Charlemagne's reign left a lasting legacy. It connected distant regions, fostered economic growth, and inspired future rulers to invest in public works. Diplomacy with Byzantium and the Abbasids, 800-810. Charlemagne's coronation as Emperor of the Romans in 800 sent shockwaves through the Byzantine Empire. In Constantinople, Empress Irene, the first woman to rule the empire in her own right, viewed the title as a direct challenge to Byzantine authority. For centuries, the Eastern Roman Empire had claimed exclusive rights to the Roman legacy. Charlemagne's new title blurred that claim, creating a diplomatic stalemate. Initial overtures between the two courts were frosty, with Irene refusing to recognize his imperial status. Yet both rulers understood the value of détente. The tension eased slightly when Irene proposed a marriage alliance between herself and Charlemagne, a union that would have united East and West under a single imperial crown. The offer, though politically tantalizing, foundered on practical and cultural grounds. Byzantine elites opposed a marriage to a barbarian Frank, while Charlemagne's advisors doubted Irene's ability to maintain power. When Irene was deposed in 802, her successor, Nikephoros I, continued negotiations. After years of maneuvering, the Byzantines reluctantly acknowledged Charlemagne's title in 812 in exchange for territorial concessions in Venice and Dalmatia. To the east, Charlemagne cultivated a surprising alliance with the Abbasid Caliphate, ruled by Harun al-Rashid. The Caliph, famed for his patronage of the arts and sciences, saw strategic value in befriending the Franks. Both rulers shared a common enemy, the Umayyad Emirate in Spain. In 802, Harun sent Charlemagne a series of lavish gifts, including a clockwork water clock, silks, spices, and an Asian elephant named Abul Abbas. The elephant, a living symbol of Abbasid power, became a sensation in Aachen, drawing crowds and cementing the caliph's reputation as a ruler of global stature. These exchanges were more than symbolic. They opened channels for cultural and intellectual exchange. Frankish envoys marveled at Baghdad's House of Wisdom, while Abbasid scholars studied Carolingian reforms. The relationship also had pragmatic aims. Harun sought to counter Byzantine influence, while Charlemagne gained prestige as a player on the world stage. The elephant, though impractical in the chilly north, underscored the Frankish court's connection to distant, tough, sophisticated civilizations. Charlemagne's diplomacy revealed his nuanced understanding of power. By balancing confrontation with compromise, he navigated the complex web of medieval geopolitics. His recognition by Byzantium and friendship with the Abbasids elevated his empire's status, proving that even in a fractured world, bridges could be built across faiths and frontiers. Charlemagne's family and personal life. Charlemagne's personal life was as complex as his political career. He married at least 4 times and had numerous concubines, fathering over a dozen children. His marriages were often strategic, cementing alliances with powerful families. His first wife, Desiderata, was a Lombard princess, but the union was short-lived, ending in divorce when Charlemagne allied with the Papacy. His later wives, including Hildegard and Fastrada, bore him many children, some of whom played key roles in his administration. Charlemagne's children were integral to his vision of governance. His sons, particularly Charles the Younger, Pepin of Italy, and Louis the Pious, were groomed for leadership. They were appointed as sub-kings, ruling regions like Aquitaine and Bavaria under their father's supervision. This system allowed Charlemagne to delegate authority while maintaining control. His daughters, though excluded from formal power, wielded influence at court. They were educated and politically astute, often serving as advisors or intermediaries. Yet family life was not without strife. Charlemagne's relationships with his sons were marked by both affection and tension. He demanded loyalty and competence, punishing dissent harshly. His treatment of his eldest son, Pepin the Hunchback, was particularly brutal. After a failed rebellion in 792, Pepin was exiled to a monastery, a fate that underscored the high stakes of Carolingian politics. Charlemagne's personal habits reveal a man of contradictions. He was deeply religious, attending Mass daily and promoting Christian reforms, yet he indulged in worldly pleasures. He enjoyed hunting, feasting, and the company of women, earning a reputation for vitality and charisma. His court at Aachen became a cultural hub, attracting scholars, poets, and musicians. Despite his many relationships, Charlemagne's legacy was shaped by his inability to establish a clear succession plan. His reliance on multiple heirs sowed the seeds of future conflict, as his grandsons would later tear the empire apart. Division of the Empire 806. In 806, Charlemagne formalized his plans for the empire's division in the Divisio Regnorum. This document outlined how his realm would be split among his 3 surviving sons, Charles the Younger, Pepin of Italy, and Louis the Pious. Each son was granted a portion of the empire, reflecting Charlemagne's belief in shared governance. Charles the Younger, the eldest, received the core Frankish territories, including Austrasia and Neustria. Pepin, already ruling Italy, retained control of the Lombard kingdom. Louis, the youngest, was given Aquitaine and the Spanish March. This division aimed to balance power while preserving the empire's unity. Yet the plan was fraught with risks. It assumed that the brothers would cooperate, a hope that proved naive. Charlemagne's own rise to power had been marked by fraternal conflict, and history seemed poised to repeat itself. The Divisio Regnorum also ignored the aspirations of other family members, including Charlemagne's grandsons and nephews, who felt entitled to a share of the inheritance. The division reflected Charlemagne's pragmatic approach to governance. He recognized the challenges of ruling a vast empire and sought to delegate authority effectively. However, it also revealed his inability to transcend the Frankish tradition of partible inheritance, a practice that would ultimately undermine his life's work. When Charlemagne died in 814, the stage was set for a struggle over his legacy. The empire he had built would soon fracture, its unity sacrificed to the ambitions of his heirs. Charlemagne's death, 814. Charlemagne died on January 28, 814, at the age of 72. His death marked the end of an era, leaving a void that none of his successors could fill. He was buried in the Palatine Chapel at Aachen, the city he had transformed into the heart of his empire. His tomb, adorned with a simple inscription, became a site of pilgrimage and reverence. The emperor's final years were marked by declining health and introspection. He spent much of his time in Aachen, overseeing the completion of the chapel and reflecting on his legacy. Though he remained active in governance, he delegated more authority to his son Louis, whom he had crowned co-emperor in 813. Louis the Pious inherited an empire at its zenith, but also at a crossroads. Charlemagne's reforms had strengthened the realm, but its sheer size and diversity made it difficult to govern. The challenges of succession, regional autonomy, and external threats loomed large. Charlemagne's death was mourned across Europe. Chroniclers praised his achievements, hailing him as a second Constantine or David. Yet they also acknowledged his flaws, from his ruthless campaigns to his struggles with family dynamics. His reign was a testament to the possibilities and limitations of human ambition. The empire he left behind was a fragile construct, held together by his personal authority. Without his guiding hand, it would soon unravel, its unity giving way to fragmentation and conflict. Louis the Pious and Civil War. Louis the Pious, Charlemagne's sole surviving son, faced immense challenges as emperor. Though well-intentioned, he lacked his father's charisma and political acumen. His reign was marked by a series of missteps that weakened the empire and ignited civil war. One of Louis's first acts was to revise Charlemagne's succession plan. In 817, he issued the Ordinatio Imperia, which designated his eldest son, Lothair, as sole heir. This decision alienated his younger sons, Pepin and Louis the German, who rebelled against their father. The resulting conflicts, known as the Carolingian Civil Wars, drained the empire's resources and undermined its stability. Louis's piety, while admirable, often clashed with the realities of governance. He sought to reform the church and promote moral rectitude, but his efforts alienated powerful nobles and clergy. His penchant for public penance, including a humiliating act of contrition in 833, further eroded his authority. The civil wars exposed the fragility of the Carolingian system. Regional elites, sensing weakness, asserted their independence, while external threats like Viking raids intensified. By the time of Louis's death in 840, the empire was on the brink of collapse. Louis's reign was a cautionary tale of good intentions gone awry. His inability to balance piety and pragmatism hastened the empire's decline, setting the stage for its eventual division. Treaty of Verdun, 843. The Treaty of Verdun, signed in 843, formalized the division of Charlemagne's empire. Lothair, the eldest son of Louis the Pious, retained the imperial title and control of the Middle Kingdom, a strip of land stretching from the North Sea to Italy. Louis the German received East Francia, the Germanic heartland, while Charles the Bald ruled West Francia, encompassing much of modern France. The treaty aimed to end the civil wars that had plagued the empire since Louis's death. Yet, it also entrenched the divisions that would shape Europe's future. The Middle Kingdom, though strategically significant, proved difficult to govern and quickly fragmented. East and West Francia, by contrast, evolved into distinct political and cultural entities. The Treaty of Verdun marked the end of the Carolingian Empire as a unified entity. It also signaled the rise of feudalism, as regional lords filled the power vacuum left by the weakening monarchy. The dream of a united Christendom, so central to Charlemagne's vision, seemed increasingly distant. Yet the treaty also laid the foundations for modern Europe. The boundaries it established foreshadowed the nations of France and Germany, while its emphasis on negotiated settlements influenced later diplomatic practices. The Treaty of Verdun was both an end and a beginning. It closed the chapter on Charlemagne's empire while opening a new era of European history: Viking invasions and fragmentation. The Viking invasions of the 9th century compounded the Carolingian Empire's internal divisions. These seafaring raiders from Scandinavia exploited the empire's weakness, launching devastating attacks on coastal and riverine settlements. Their longships, capable of navigating shallow waters, allowed them to strike deep into the interior. The Vikings' tactics were ruthless. They targeted monasteries, which housed wealth and were often poorly defended. The sack of Lindisfarne in 793, though outside Carolingian territory, foreshadowed the chaos to come. By the mid-9th century, Viking raids had become a constant threat, stretching from the British Isles to the Mediterranean. The Carolingian response was fragmented and ineffective. Regional lords, preoccupied with their own rivalries, often failed to coordinate defenses. The empire's once mighty armies, now decentralized and underfunded, struggled to repel the invaders. The Viking raids accelerated the empire's fragmentation. Local nobles, tasked with defending their lands, gained greater autonomy, further eroding central authority. By the late 9th century, the Carolingian Empire had effectively dissolved, replaced by a patchwork of feudal states. Yet the Viking invasions also spurred innovation. The development of fortified towns, or burhs, and the rise of local militias laid the groundwork for future state building. The raids, though destructive, forced Europe to adapt, setting the stage for its eventual recovery. Otto I and the Holy Roman Empire, 962. The Holy Roman Empire, founded by Otto I in 962, revived the imperial title, dormant since Charlemagne's death. Otto, a Saxon king, sought to emulate Charlemagne's achievements, uniting Germany and Italy under his rule. His coronation by Pope John XII marked the beginning of a new era in European politics. Otto's reign was marked by military prowess and political savvy. He defeated the Magyars at the Battle of Lechfeld in 955, ending their incursions into Central Europe. He also curbed the power of regional nobles, centralizing authority in his own hands. The Holy Roman Empire, though inspired by Charlemagne's legacy, was a distinct entity. It was more decentralized and feudal, reflecting the realities of medieval governance. Yet it preserved the idea of a united Christendom, serving as a counterbalance to the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic caliphates. Otto's coronation also reinforced the papacy's role in legitimizing imperial authority. This relationship, though often contentious, shaped European politics for centuries. The Holy Roman Empire was a testament to Charlemagne's enduring influence. It kept alive the dream of a unified Europe, even as it adapted to new challenges and realities. Charlemagne's mythologization. Charlemagne's legacy was not confined to history. It also entered the realm of legend. Medieval chroniclers and poets transformed him into an idealized figure, a paragon of Christian kingship. The Song of Roland, composed in the 11th century, depicted him as a wise and just ruler, leading his knights against the forces of evil. This mythologization served a political purpose. It reinforced the idea of a united Christendom, inspiring later rulers like Frederick Barbarossa and Charles V. It also shaped European identity, linking the continent's past to its future. Yet the legends obscured the complexities of Charlemagne's reign. They glossed over his brutality, his family conflicts, and the fragility of his empire. They presented a sanitized version of history, one that emphasized unity over division. Charlemagne's mythologization endures to this day. He remains a symbol of European unity, invoked by politicians and scholars alike. His legacy, both real and imagined, continues to shape our understanding of the past. Cultural legacy, European identity. Charlemagne's reign left an indelible mark on European culture. His promotion of learning, his legal reforms, and his vision of a united Christendom influenced the development of Western civilization. The Carolingian Renaissance, though short-lived, preserved classical knowledge and laid the groundwork for future intellectual movements. Charlemagne's emphasis on education and literacy had lasting implications. It fostered a culture of scholarship that extended beyond the clergy, influencing the rise of universities in the 12th century. His legal reforms, though imperfect, inspired later codifications like the Corpus Juris Civilis. The idea of a united Europe, rooted in Christian values, remains central to Charlemagne's legacy. It inspired figures like Jean Monnet and Robert Schumann, architects of the modern European Union. Charlemagne's cultural legacy is a testament to the power of vision. He sought to create a world where knowledge, justice, and faith coexisted, a vision that continues to resonate today. Closing reflection, Charlemagne's enduring vision. Charlemagne's reign was a turning point in European history. He united much of Western Europe, revived learning, and laid the foundations for modern governance. Yet his achievements were not without contradictions. He was a warrior and a scholar, a reformer and a conqueror, a man of faith and a man of ambition. His empire, though short-lived, shaped the course of European history. It inspired the Holy Roman Empire, influenced the development of feudalism, and preserved the intellectual heritage of antiquity. His vision of a united Christendom, though never fully realized, remains a powerful ideal. Charlemagne's legacy is a reminder of the complexities of leadership. He sought to balance power and piety, unity and diversity, tradition and innovation. His successes and failures offer lessons for our own time as we grapple with the challenges of globalization and identity. In the end, Charlemagne's enduring vision was not just of an empire, but of a world where people could live in peace, guided by knowledge and faith. It is a vision that continues to inspire, reminding us of the possibilities of human endeavor. That concludes this epic video on arguably Europe's greatest king. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more history videos.